right, so think about this for a second. We live in a society that's completely dependent on science and technology, but nobody understands it. So what is our society doing about it? Or more importantly, what is our city doing about this? So let's think about Chicago. What defines Chicago? What is the thing that, that people know about it? It's our politicians, sometimes it's our sports teams, but what is the things that we brag about our city, you know, when we talk to outsiders? Well, it's our arts and culture sector. I mean, there's the music, the symphony, the Art Institute, you know, the opera. There's this phenomenal architecture that we get to see in Chicago, our lakefront, our parks, all this amazing stuff. But there's something missing from that reputation. Yeah, it's science. Chicago has more science research than any city in this country, so it drives me nuts that Chicago is not known as the center of science in this nation. So what I want to talk about is, do you know how much science goes on in Chicago? Maybe not. Look at this. We got, you know, major research universities, medical centers, not one but 2 national labs in our backyards, zoos, 6 science museums, 6. Let's start with the national labs. This is 2 of 14 national labs. Now, Fermilab does mostly particle physics research, but Argonne Labs does nanotechnology, biology, chemistry, environmental research, all kinds of things. That's $1 billion of federal research that goes on here. We've got, like I said, at least 4 major research universities, 6 if you count Northern and U of I. All these medical centers, including the Rehab Institute of Chicago, which is, you know, famous throughout the world. Now, you probably don't think about zoos very often, but do you know our 2 zoos, both of them do conservation work internationally on protecting species. And if you're a plant lover, there's also all the conservatories and the Morton Arboretum. But let's talk about museums. Now, everybody knows the Museum of Science and Industry. It's freaking enormous, right? But did you know the Field Museum has hundreds of PhD researchers working on its collection internationally? As does the Adler Planetarium. They've got astronomers doing real research and biologists at Shedd Aquarium. And the Nature Museum, you might think is new, but it's got an enormous collection that's over 100 years old. So you probably aren't thinking about all this kind of stuff in Chicago because it's the arts and the culture and the humanities that get all the attention and all the advocacy. And they also get all the money that goes into this sort of thing. But the challenge is, why doesn't Chicago have a Department of Science and Technology in the same way that it has a Department of Cultural Affairs? This is the sort of thing that really could boost Chicago. I think it's kind of unfair, and it's also not a great policy decision when you think about boosting economic development and business development. And part of the challenge is the audience. There's a discrepancy. In arts and culture, think about it. That's all for adults, right? And there's a subset for kids, because kids are a subset of the population. But if you flip to the science and tech side, it's all for kids and nothing for adults. So some years ago, I started a nonprofit to address that gap about science research for adults. But everybody was really skeptical because they said, well, people don't care about science the way they care about arts and culture. But now things are starting to change in the last couple years. So it started with this. There was this panic, essentially, in the US, that the US is losing its primacy in science and technology, right? But then the Mythbusters phenomenon happened, and that's not a kid's show, right? So there started to be this attention for science education, but then it finally reached the adults. So there are science outreach, like science cafes. Northwestern does one in Evanston, U of C does one at Bucktown. Argonne and Fermi are both doing public outreach programs that are huge, very well-attended kind of programs. And here's the thing, folks. This is not about you having to go back to school and get a PhD in physics and start your career over again. This is just about science that is interesting and fun and cool and relevant to your everyday life. It's, things that are fun and interesting. So when you think about this quote, it's not really, the answer to it is not, well, let's fix science education and leave adults behind. It's about kind of reaching out and saying, you know what? All of humanity, human beings, are inherently curious human beings, right? And here's the thing, every single one of you out there, I don't care what you studied in school, I don't care what you do for a living, you have a science secret. And your science secret is that thing that you think is so fascinating and so cool and so interesting. So if you would like Chicago to be known for something other than its politicians or its budget, I think you should start talking about what your science secret is and tell me, because I will be inherently curious about what it is and I want to know. So thank you.